Hello. Hey, it's Jesus Castillo here from rubyguides.com. Here's another live stream because live stream is easier to do than having to plan everything out. And I like interacting with you, talking with the chat, answering questions. So if you have any Ruby questions, make sure to type them in the chat so I can answer them for you. So you can ask about Ruby methods, Ruby classes, anything that you like that's related to Ruby programming language. So on the last live stream, I was working on some project, but we didn't make a lot of progress because I was answering questions, and that's okay. I like answering questions. But I like to start this video by showing you the progress. I made some progress with this project off stream. I want to show you what I did. So a quick reminder what the project is. A project related to the cd command, okay? So cd stands for change directory, and it's a command that you can use in the terminal in the command line to change between the different directories, right? So right now I'm the home directory, this little tilde symbol that means home directory, if you didn't know that, right? And if I want to change to another directory, then I use the change directory command. Now, when you are using the terminal a lot, the command line a lot, you're probably moving between the same directories, right? Like your project that you're working on, or your downloads folder, or your documents folder, whatever. And these folders, instead of having to type the whole name of the folder and then cd and the name of the folder, we can create an application that lets us jump to these folders faster, right? And that's called AutoJump. So that's just a reminder if you haven't seen the other live stream or if you forgot what we are working on. So that's called, again, AutoJump, okay? So now the progress I made is that we have this implemented as the command J. I can use it. This probably the most important part of the project, because the core of the project is being able to replace the original change directory command, which is harder than you think, and then be able to actually change directory. And here I'm changing to the root directory, then I can change into the temporary directory, and you can see this little message, this coming from the Ruby code, okay? So right now G is a Ruby program and is handling this change of directory. So why is this change directory thing a challenge? Well, because if we do something like ruby.e and then I do dir.change directory, it is the Ruby method for changing directory. I try to change directory here, it doesn't work. I already covered this in the first live stream about this project. And it doesn't work because Ruby is running in its own little process and thread. For this to affect the outside world, it has to be the same process. So the same process, that means bash or zsh or whatever shell program you're using. And the shell program, if you don't know, that's the I think we can get that with this. Yes. The shell program is the program that runs in your terminal to process your command, right? It's called a shell because, well, I guess because it's a shell. It gives you access to all of these commands like cd, ls, and all of these terminal commands that allow you to move between folders, and the shell keeps up the state, the current state. So it keeps track of what your current directory is and other variables like that. So that's what the shell does. And what we need to do for actually change this directory is to change the shell. So how does this g command work? Well, there is a command in your terminal. I think this works in Linux for sure, but it might also work on Mac. You have a Mac, which is pretty common for Ruby developers. Well, you can try this command, and that's the command that's called which. So if we do which, it will tell us what this is and where is it defined, right? So which cd means, well, what's the cd command? Well, the cd command is a built-in command. It means that the shell itself, the shell program, provides you with this command, gives you this command. So you can use this with any other command that you want. So you can do which Ruby, and this can be very helpful because it shows you exactly where your Ruby program is, the actual Ruby interpreter. So when you do Ruby anything, right, then what's running is this. At least this is what's running in my case. In your computer is probably a different path, right? So, and if I do which g, then I get this. And this is where it gets really interesting. By the way, you have any Ruby questions, you can type them in the chat. Hey, thanks for your effort. Thank you for watching, Joseph. Hope you're doing great. So that's the basic idea here. Now this g, what is this? Well, there is another command that's called type. We can say type j, and it says it's a shell function, and it's defined here. So what I'm doing is I'm defining g not as a binary or as a Ruby program, but I'm defining g as a bash, as a shell function, right? And the definition is to call this bin AutoJump program with whatever arguments. So this is $1 is like a kind of global variable, but not really. In bash or shells, this is the first argument. So when I do gtemp, this refers to this, okay? And if I have another thing, then that will be this. It will be this thing. That will be the second argument, right? And then another interesting thing happens here is this AND symbol. It's just like in Ruby, right? It means that we want to run this, and if this returns true, then we are going to run this. And this source, this is another built-in command. As we can see, if we do source is a shell built-in. And by the way, you can find all of this. And like I said in the other video, I will keep saying because I think it's very important. One of your main jobs as a Ruby developer is to figure things out. What that means is that nobody is going to give you everything already done for you. You're not going to get a manual where everything is explained to you in very detail, in explicit detail for every project that you want to build. Okay, so I can give you a Ruby manual, but you still have, there's a lot of other things as well that you don't know and that you can search. So you can use Google, you can ask very specific questions, and you can try things. Don't be afraid to try things and just see if this works, this doesn't work. Well, you have to try. You might not find it in Google, or you might not find an answer to your question. You have to try things. Be a little creative, right? So that's what I call that you need. That's what I mean when I say that you need to figure things out. You need to put some work into it. You need to think and try things and do research. Okay? So now we can take a look at this file. I'm going to use VI for this because it's very quick. We don't have to open Atom or any other more heavy editor. And here we can see we have a Ruby script. The only difference is this line. So this line is called a shell bank. What it does is it tells the shell, again it's the program that runs, the main program that runs in the terminal, that runs your commands. And it's telling the shell how to interpret this code. So basically what I did here is I took the output of which Ruby, which tells us where our Ruby executable is, or Ruby binary, Ruby interpreter, right? So that's the program that knows how to read Ruby source code and make it do its thing, make it work, right? It interprets the source code into an actual running program. So with this line, and this line has a very specific format. It has this hash symbol, then exclamation mark, and then a path. Okay? Again, this is called a shell bank. This is going to be used to interpret this code. So this code is regular Ruby code. And what this is doing is it's writing a file. So file write, this is the file class, and write is a method. So whenever you see this dot something, this almost always what we call a method call. So we're telling the file class to do something, and that something is to write. Okay, so class, method. That's just for the more beginners that don't know that. Again, here at the dir class, the home method. What does this do? Well, you can just open IRB and try that out. So you can find out how that works. I encourage you to do that. Play around with code. You don't need a whole project to play around with code. You can just open IRB or you can open Pry and just type some code and see what happens, right? In here we can see that dir.home returns my home folder. Okay, so if I open this again, we can see that this is creating using something called string interpolation. So string interpolation is this thing. It allows you to merge together merge together or combine the output of a method or a variable into some fixed part, some static part. So we can combine different strings together to make a bigger string. So if I copy this, again, I go to IRB, we get this. So now we get a path, very specific path, that we are going to be using for AutoJump implementation. And the second argument is the content of the file. That means it's what goes into this file. What are we writing into this file? Well, we're writing this. And this is the cd command, right? Change directory. And then again, we have a string interpolation, which means we are combining something, we're merging something to this string. And that something is argv, which is an array, 0. Again, if you don't know what argv does, just jump into Pry, try it out. It's okay. Tada, it's an empty string array. You can even do argv.class. As you can see, it's an array. Very clear, right? Of course, if you do argv0, that's the first element, which in this case is empty. You can also Google argv. You want to try all of these things. You don't only want to Google argv, you also want to try it out yourself. That's how you learn. You have to learn the same thing from different angles, from different perspectives. And even getting different definitions for the same word. This is exactly one way to do that. Okay. So argv0, I can tell you what this is exactly. It's going to be the first argument. So if we do cd temp, this is going to be this. Okay, so again, this, the thing I'm highlighting, if you're only listening for some reason to the coding video, which is okay. So I'm highlighting argv index 0, and then I'm highlighting the second argument for cd, or the first argument for the cd command, change directory, which in this case is temp. So this is going to look like that. And the /n, this is a special character, which means new line. Okay? You don't actually see this character, you see its effect, which is creating a new line. So now that we analyzed, we broke down this code into pieces, and that's how you understand code. You don't just look at this line and magically understand all of it, because the line of code is made of smaller pieces, as I just demonstrated. The first piece is what's happening here from the outside, from the higher level, before we get into the parentheses. Well, it's a class and it's a method, right? Methods do things. If you don't know what, in this case is very clear, we are writing something into a file. And then you can analyze the arguments. This comma tells us that clearly we have a first argument and a second argument. If you look up the documentation from right, you will find out that the first argument, or first parameter, can also be called parameter, is the file name. The second one is the content, right? And then you break down how the strings are put together using this string interpolation. Okay? So that's how that works. Okay, and the other part is this that we have been seeing, jumping to ARGB0. And yes, I do speak Spanish. And you say, do you speak Spanish? No, are you saying, are you speak Spanish? Not correct. But your name doesn't sound like it's coming from a Spanish speaking country. Where are you from, Mishu Taco? I'm curious to know. Okay, so if we go back here, I do temp. Now we can understand where this message is coming from, right? Because if I do cd temp, there is no message by default. So here is the thing. The way this is working is we're creating this AutoJump file, which has the command that we want to happen. And then if we go back to our J here, we can see what happens with that file. And remember this tilde character, this kind of wobbly line thing. It's called a tilde, I believe. It means home folder. Okay, home folder, right there. That's my home folder. And by the way, if you're enjoying this, and make sure to check out my website, rubyguides.com. There are a lot of tutorials that you can find. I also have a Ruby book. It's called it's called Ruby Deep Dive, and you can find it on my website, which is rubyguides.com. Okay. So yeah, the book is called Ruby Deep Dive, and the website is rubyguides.com. You can find the book and also a lot of Ruby tutorials. There are over 100 Ruby tutorials, so a lot of content for you to learn from. Of course, not organized in any particular fashion, so that's why there is the book. Also, subscribe to channel if you haven't yet, so you can get more videos like this, and click the like button for me so more people can find this video. So this second part is source. So what it's going to do is going to read this file that we created from Ruby. That's the Ruby part. And then it's going to apply the command. And because the command was cd something, change directory something, then that's how we actually change directory. That's the whole idea that makes this work. Okay, so I hope that you get the idea. And the reason, again, the reason we have to do that is because this is the only way to change directory. There is no special system call or anything. We have to do it within the current shell, within the current process. And the way to do that is to use this collaboration between Ruby and then the source command, which loads the command into the current process. And that's exactly what we want to do. Now that we have that, then we can take the next step into our Ruby code. And the next step is to create a hash of frequent folders. So I can call that frequent directories, and that's going to be a hash. And into here we can add this folder, which is the folder we are going into. We want to change directory into. And then we can do plus equals 1. And to do that, we have to do a little change here. Okay. So then we start the counting process for most frequent directories. But the thing is, we need to save this somewhere. We need to save this information in some place. So there is different ways to do that. One way to do is to use something called pstore. So you can do require pstore. This part of Ruby. A lot of people are not familiar with this, but it's part of Ruby and it's like a mini database that you can use. And another thing is we can also use YAML. So YAML is mostly used for configuration files and things like that, but we can also use it for this purpose. So which one should we use? Do you want us to use pstore or YAML? Hi Jesus, hi Li Yuang. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Let's do, by the way, ask if you have any questions of Ruby, you can type them in the chat. Type your Ruby questions in the chat. It's okay to ask questions. I think some people don't ask questions because maybe they're afraid we make a wrong question or anything like that. Don't worry about that. Just ask your questions and it's going to be fine. So let's do pstore. And to use this, we're going to do I think let's go to IRB. Okay, that's how you try these things out. We don't have to incorporate or implement it yet in our code. If we want to do YAML, I think we need YAML. There is a read. I know there is load. Yes, this load and dump. So the fact that we get undefined method, it means there is no read. But because I get grown number of arguments, I know that this exists, but they need the right amount of arguments, as you can see there. So that could be one way to do it. And then if we want to do the pstore route, then it looks something like this. pstore.new, then you need a path. So we can do pstore. Let's use string interpolation here for the home folder. And then call this something AutoJump DB. How about that? And by the way, if you didn't know what this dot means in the front of the file name, that means hidden folder, right? So we do this because we don't want this to show up as a regular user file. It's just like a configuration file kind of thing. So that's why I use the dot in front of the file name. So yeah, that's that. And now we have a pstore. We can call this store. We can call this db for database. And then we can write into it, which is like this: transaction, then T for transaction, and then we can do data equals there, an empty array. Or actually we can do our array with default value. There we go. And that's how we can save a hash into a file. That's also called serialization. YAML. Hi Jesus. Hi. So for the YAML version, we will do require YAML. Then YAML new thing. No, we need to dump, which takes 2 arguments. We can use the same, or we can use temp just for testing. Something.yaml, and then here our hash. There it is, and you can see what that looks like. Oh, but that's that's the actual content. Now we have to write this file dot, but I don't think it gets the default value. So let's do empty hash. Then file dot write them something dot YAML, and yes, I think that's about right. Hold on. Not this. You have to pay attention in programming to what you're doing. See? Sometimes it's not a big error, it's just you're missing this little bit of this very small thing. A lot of times it's just paying attention to the small details. Like in here, I'm missing the starting slash to make the full path. That alone makes your program not work. So it helps to pay attention. In here I had this error, which is not file YAML, it's just YAML. So I remove that. And now it works, right? So these little things can make your program work or not work. And sometimes when I teach one-on-one, I see that people get lost into trying to find some big thing that's wrong, when sometimes it's just, or most of the time, just the little things like this. And sometimes you are even blind to it. You don't see it because you think it's somewhere else, but it's right there in front of you. Okay? So yeah, that's used to say it when you are programming, you get an error. 2 things to do mostly is read the error message and understand what it's saying. Look where the error is coming from. And also don't make any assumptions about what's right and what's wrong. You want to pay attention and slowly check everything. So yeah. Now we have this, how you write the YAML file. And then the interesting thing about YAML, there is a dump and there is a load, but the load takes the file name. Or not. I know there was a method for YAML that reads the file name. Let's do this. No, not YAML, file read. And then if we do YAML.load, we get a hash back. So that's how you use YAML. Okay. So now that we know our options and get an idea of how they work, that's exactly what you want to do, then we can add them into your code. Whoops. So we could do something like db equals pstore new, and then they are home AutoJump.db, and here we can db transaction t, and then t data equals or frequent directories. And that's how we would save the data into the database. We still have to load the data, but that's one step. That's another thing. You do things step by step. You don't do everything at the same time. Just like in here, just as we read this code by parts, right? So for now, I think we are done here. We will continue this into the next stream, live stream. Thanks a lot for watching. If you want to keep learning, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Visit my website, rubyguides.com, and click the like button for me so I know that you like this video. Thanks a lot for watching. I will see you in the next video.